As US President Donald Trump concludes his visit to the Middle East, what are the key challenges facing the region? Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. From a besieged Gaza to escalating tensions between Israel and Iran and ongoing instability in Yemen, the Middle East remains a region marked by volatility. US President Trump held high-profile meetings with leaders from Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the UAE, but the conflicts persist. What can be done to address these pressing issues? We'll explore that in the program, but first a look at Trump's inaugural state visit to the region.
President Trump was received with an extreme warm welcome from the President of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. And this comes as the UAE and the United States both renew their commitment to one another, both leaders showing confidence in the leadership of the other, signaling that together they can work to expand ties between the two countries. This comes as Mohammed bin Zayed has pledged $1.4 trillion of investments into the United States within the next 10 years. The cooperation is basically focused on technological aspects, space programs and space technologies, as well as AI, which the UAE is extremely interested in. One of the deals also announced will be allowing the UAE to receive top-tier AI chips for manufacturer NVIDIA. The US firm will provide about 500,000 chips annually to the UAE to support its AI aspirations. The United Arab Emirates wants to become an AI hub in the Middle East. On the other hand, the UAE, also to show its appreciation, has provided Trump with the state's highest merit in show of appreciation for Trump, who has become the first president to make a stop here at the UAE in about 17 years. Together, they vowed to expand further trade and investments and military cooperation between the two countries. With the UAE, Trump concludes his Middle East tour that has included a huge investments promised from three countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the UAE. Politics was also on top of that agenda, including a possible Iranian nuclear deal, which on his right before he came to the United Arab Emirates in Qatar, Trump said on Thursday that they are very close of striking a deal. This is Khoury from Abu Dhabi in the UAE.
To discuss this and more, let's bring in our guests. Joining us here in the studio, Nabeel Khoury is a former US diplomat and author of Bunker Diplomacy, an Arab American in the US Foreign Service, personal reflections on 25 years of US policy in the Middle East. From Virginia, we're joined by Trita Parsi. He is the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft and an expert on the geopolitics of the Middle East. Also with us in the studio, William Lawrence is the Director of Area Studies and a Senior Academic Fellow at the National Council on US-Arab Relations. And from Riyadh, we're joined by Ahmed Al-Ibrahim. He is a Saudi political expert. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. Ahmed Al-Ibrahim, great to have you with us. Welcome to the show. Let me start with you. This is President Donald Trump's first international trip of his second term. His first stop, of course, Saudi Arabia. How significant was this visit for Saudi Arabia, and what do you believe was achieved?
First of all, greetings to you and to your panel and to your viewers. I think this was a historic visit again that he did on his second term, that he came to Saudi Arabia. This means to us a lot. It means a lot of validations, a lot of respects, a lot of acknowledgement of what Saudi Arabia has been doing and the weight of Saudi Arabia among the other GCC Arab countries and on the world scale. I think the synergy was achieved.
Trita Parsi, great to see you, Trita. While President Trump was in Saudi Arabia, he also addressed the US-Saudi Investment Forum, and during that address, he talked about Iran. This is some of what he had to say. Let's listen.
I want to make a deal with Iran. If I can make a deal with Iran, I'll be very happy if we're going to make your region and the world a safer place. But if Iran's leadership rejects this olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, then we will have no choice but to inflict massive maximum pressure drive Iranian oil exports to zero like I did before. If you know that, they were a virtually bankrupt country because of what I did. They had no money for terror. They had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah.
So, Trita, when President Trump talks about a deal with Iran, what exactly is this deal that he is considering? I mean, there has been talk of the United States wanting Iran to dismantle completely its nuclear program. Is it that, or are the goals perhaps a little bit more modest?
We actually don't know, because Trump started off with a very clear message saying that his only red line is weaponization. He has on numerous occasions, including in this last week during the trip to the Middle East, reiterated that. But he's also said other things such as dismantlement, zero enrichment. And those two things are not entirely compatible in the sense of his likelihood of getting a deal. If he's pursuing no weaponization, there are plenty of opportunities for a deal. There's plenty of space for a compromise. But if his position ends up being, because I don't think there is a clear position at this point, zero enrichment, even if it's just temporary, I fear that he will miss the opportunity. The Iranians will miss the opportunity as well. But there's a massive opportunity right now to strike a deal. The Saudis are on board. The Emiratis appear to be on board. The only real opposition is coming from Israel, which is very different from 2015, when also the Saudis and the Emiratis were skeptical of a deal. It's a great opportunity, but if Trump goes back to some of these old positions of the U.S., then I fear that the opportunity will be lost.
Trita, let's say if this deal is about no weaponization, what do you think Iran would want in return?
Well, the Iranians have been looking for sanctions relief, but this time around they want sustainable sanctions relief. They want to make sure that the next president is not just going to quickly undo this deal and reverse it, and as a result, the Iranians will have lost all of the sanctions relief that they were promised, despite the fact of having delivered on the nuclear front. They also want this time around America itself to enter the Iranian market. This is also very different from 2015 and the JCPOA. Back then, the US was not pushing for primary sanctions relief, meaning sanctions relief on American companies, and the Iranians were not demanding it. This time around, I think the Iranians have come to the conclusion that the best way of making the sanctions relief sustainable is to also make sure that the primary sanctions relief are lifted and that American companies enter the Iranian market. If they do so, it will make it much easier for Europeans to enter the market, as well as for regional states to invest in Iran as well. But that means that the US would give more, so the Iranians have to give more. Giving more, however, is different from giving it all. And that is what dismantlement and zero enrichment would be.
Right. Nabeel Khoury, Trump also announced during this visit the lifting of sanctions on Syria in order, quote, to give them a chance at greatness, end quote. He was also able to meet with the Syrian interim president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, on Wednesday in Riyadh. How significant is that, the lifting of sanctions on Syria?
Well, it's very significant, the recognition itself. You know, 3 weeks after Ahmed al-Sharaa reached Damascus, the acting assistant secretary for the Middle East went to Damascus to meet him. And that was a big signal at that point. And now meeting Trump in person is a big signal on recognition of a new power in Syria and of a willingness of the US to deal with it. The question is, and of course the sanctions relief is very good if it trickles down to the Syrian people and doesn't stay only in the corridors of power. The question is, what is this new relationship about? And frankly, what is Syria going to be used for? While Sharaa was in Riyadh meeting with Trump, Israel continued to bomb different places in Syria, has expanded beyond the Golan Heights, and there is no prospect of peace there on that front.
Right.
There are also a lot of serious problems inside Syria. So yes, on the surface, this is a good thing, but we have to wait and see. There is Turkish influence, Saudi influence, and now American influence.
Right. How big a shift was this in American policy? Because here you have the American president talking to someone who was once a leader of an offshoot of Al-Qaeda.
Yes. Well, one thing about Donald Trump is he's not an ideologue. He is a man of business. He cares about business opportunities, money, power, influence. But he doesn't really, he's not stuck on any ideological hang-ups of the past. Some of the people around him, though, are. There is an extreme right wing around Donald Trump.
Okay.
So we don't know in the end where they're going to take this.
William, what is your assessment of this first international visit by the president? Was it more about business, or was it a combination of business and securing America's the security interests?
It was the latter. And of course, the first trip was to the Vatican, so this was the planned first trip, but it was really the second trip. And he accomplished more than he even set out to accomplish. And I think he did more politics than he intended to. Whether on the Syrian file, whether some of the other meetings that he had that had political implications, certainly on the Iran file and some of the other things. I think the design of the trip was one that would present sort of a business bonanza for the U.S. and the Trump family, a business bonanza for Saudi Arabia, and business development. And the sort of theory of this, and what we might call a Trump doctrine, is sort of force peace on a situation as much as possible and allow business to flourish. The problem, and building a little bit on Nabeel Khoury's warnings or reservations here, is that if you don't do sustainable peace, and if you don't build sustainable structures and get into the details, the technical details, implementing this will be very, very difficult. I mean, I'll give you an example. A lot of those sanctions are congressional. Congress isn't necessarily going to just hand over the sanctions. Also, bureaucratically, it's very hard to unwind sanctions. And Trump can do all the executive orders he wants, but there has to be a deep dive into the details of what gets sanctioned and how, and the secondary sanctions, other things, whether Syria, whether Iran. And I'm afraid, take the example to make the case also of the Gaza peace plan. That was Biden's plan. Trump forced through and then didn't even force to implement as it was written because he didn't really get into the details. So my main concern in all of this is the implementation of everything that's getting announced. And there isn't a lot of clarity there on how the implementation is going to go.
Okay, very quickly, William, what is sustainable peace?
Sustainable peace is one in which the needs, if not the asks, of all the parties are met. And I'm not seeing in any of the peace deals being negotiated now those needs being met in a way that allows peace to flourish.
Okay, Trita, Parsi, of course, the biggest issue dominating the Middle East right now is what the United Nations calls a plausible genocide in Gaza. I mean, conservative estimates put the Palestinian death toll at 53,000. The enclave, as we've seen, and we see this every day, has been completely demolished. There are now millions of people starving because of the Israeli blockade. But we have the Israeli Prime Minister, he's now doubling down. He says there's going to be a new intensive offensive against the people of Gaza. Where is this heading?
Well, let me first say that I 100% agree with the previous speaker that implementation in all of this is going to be key. And so far, Trump has impressed in his ability to make quick, big decisions that breaks with conventional thinking. But when it comes to implementation, we have very little to point to be able to be confident that these big decisions actually will be seen through and will be sustainable. So that is going to be an area in which I think the administration really has to focus if they want to make sure that these wins actually are sustained as wins. In terms of Gaza, it is going in an absolutely terrible direction. I think we are seeing some indications that the Trump administration is recognizing this, perhaps even recognizing what was also mentioned earlier, which is that the political capital they use to pressure the Netanyahu government to agree to a ceasefire is wasted if you are then not doing everything you can to make sure that the deal is sustained and that you're not giving Netanyahu an opportunity to restart the war, which unfortunately the Trump administration essentially did. And this is going to be very costly because many of these other elements and agreements in the region are not going to be able to be sustained or be protected if at the same time you have this development, not just in Gaza, but in general with Israel. And as the earlier speaker also said, To what extent is an opening with Syria sustainable from both sides if in the meantime the Israelis are bombing everywhere in Syria, occupying more Syrian land? And what will that do internally in Syria in terms of national sentiments being suppressed for a prolonged period of time, in which the objections and the protest against this massive land grab by the Israelis that appears to be accepted at this point by the new Syrian government actually does not end up becoming a huge political loser for the new Syrian government?
Ahmed Al-Ibrahim, where does Saudi Arabia see itself strategically in the region? I mean, there's a number of flashpoints that we've been talking about, Gaza being one of them. Then, of course, there is Yemen. There was the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran with the establishment of diplomatic relations. But what role does Saudi Arabia see itself play?
Well, I have to just go back on what my fellow guests also they've mentioned. I think there is some sort of a black, I would say, cloud they are looking through at the region. We've been dealing with the traditional politics that you gentlemen are talking about, by congressional, by taking the right route, by being political right, by doing sanction on Iran, doing sanction on Iraq, trying to talk to all parties in Iraq, in Iran, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen. And it's only gone failed. We've seen that so many years, and we've been living in that fume. And there's a lot of instability just because these kind of decision is made 10,000 miles away in Washington or in London, and people are making decisions on these kind of countries. That does not work anymore. If you can see the recent conflict between India and Pakistan, it was solved within 3 days. Donald Trump has stepped in, has understood the challenge. Don't undermine the kind of capability. Donald Trump is not working by himself. He has a panel, he has a different eye, different lens that he's looking at. But as a Middle Eastern living in the Middle East, we are tired of these kind of political right. We've seen the exit strategy from Afghanistan. We've seen what happened in Iran. We've seen what happened in Iraq, in Syria, Lebanon. Isn't it enough? Actually, we love the new Trump doctrine, and I hope it will continue, because this is what the applications that works in the Middle East. We cannot just sit in corridors in the Congress or in the White House and decide what's the people, or how to live, or make people live in this region. And that's why going at 40,000 feet and looking at this region does not work anymore. Now, as far as Saudi Arabia, the visit of Trump to Saudi Arabia is actually positioned Saudi Arabia as a cornerstone, as a major influencer that in the region, one of the key holders to the region to make the decisions for the region. Well, if you look at MBS kind of acted as a guarantor for Ahmed al-Shar in order to have a prosperous Syria. And this is going to basically put more weight on the Saudi leaders in order to make the Syria model is the right model. And this model is going to continue and be implemented into Lebanon and other countries that they have a hostile issue, maybe to the Yemen. And we've seen now that Yemen is basically the Houthis has come and they surrendered, and now they are in talks. So these kind of things is really moving on the ground, but actually making decisions, and we're trying to assemble things right, to put it back right, does not work in the region. We've been trying it for the past 51 years. And by the way, we need to give a right for the Syrian people. They've been under the dictatorship for 51 years. Whatever they're living right now, it's better than what 50 years happened in their time. And I think whatever challenges they're going to go, it's going to become by negotiation, by the UN resolution. At least there is a government that can talk to, or a government that's going to build institution within the country in order basically to voice their concern to the international communities to make decisions. So let's help these countries. Let's empower them to make their own decision, and let's try a different methodology. And that's what Saudi Arabia actually has just started with Iran. And I think in the horizon, we're going to have a peaceful region with probably plenty of business going to flourish in this region, and back and forth. This is in our belief as a Muslim, this is how Islam has been flourished around the world. It's by trading, not by war.
Nabeel Khoury, to what extent is Trump's policy in the Middle East driven by the fact that he wants Arab countries to establish diplomatic relations with Israel, the so-called Abraham Accords, which actually happened in his first term? He wants to expand that, and The big goal is to get Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel and to establish diplomatic relations with
That's
Israel.
right. And clearly MBS has convinced Trump to put this aside for now. There was a brief mention of it in Trump's speech from Riyadh, and he said, I am going to leave this up to you so you can do it in your own time, which means MBS begged off. So there was no big announcement of trying to expand the Abraham Accords. Now, look, this was a very major visit. Whether one is for Trump or against Trump, one has to recognize this is a major new initiative. It puts the focus on the Middle East and particularly the Gulf region. And it makes it a center of diplomacy and a center of business, big business activity. The relationship between the US and the 3 Gulf countries visited has taken on a completely new dimension and depth. Now, the problem is on the political side. The word Gaza was mentioned only once briefly by Trump.
Isn't that the problem? The world is focused on Gaza right now.
The crux of the problem, look, while all this, Trump was treated like a rock star. He's clearly perceived in a very positive way, in the Gulf at least. But while he was there, Israel was bombing nonstop in Gaza, and it continues to occupy a portion of Lebanon and a big portion of Syria. So clearly there is no Israeli buy-in into this peace talk that Trump is saying. So far, I agree with William and with Trita that this is these are cliches, these are slogans. But where is the implementation? And I think clearly Gaza and the Palestinian people of Gaza come out as the biggest losers. The big money that is being thrown about, and it's very major money, is it going to trickle down? Forget, the Yemeni people, the Palestinians, the Lebanese, the Syrians, and what about the average American? Is the average American going to benefit if Elon Musk pockets $1 billion or $2 billion extra? Is that going to mean more jobs? He's out cutting jobs, not creating jobs. So there are a lot of questions, and I'm afraid in the end, this visit is about the haves and the have-nots. The haves have clearly made more money and are enjoying each other's company tremendously. It was a love fest. But the have-nots are still have-nots and are still suffering.
William, getting back to what's going on in Israel now and the United States relationship, I'm wondering to what extent that might be changing. There was an interview done with a former Israeli ambassador, Ilan Baruch, by the Guardian newspaper. And Ilan Baruch told the newspaper, and I'm quoting him here, he said, Trump has broken the paradigm of shared convictions and mutual strategic interests with Israel. Baruch says, Trump is the first president in a generation to place doubts on that equation.
Yeah, there's no question there's a rift between Trump and Netanyahu, a rift that could be quickly repaired if both sides found it advantageous, or a rift that could continue to aggravate if things continue on their current path because of the deep disagreements between the most far-right Israeli government we've had since the foundation of Israel and the current posture of Trump that we all agree on. I think here that he's sort of moving in another direction away from Israel, and there's a lot of discussion now in Washington about how the Arab countries are offering the U.S. much more than Israel. So there's a potential here of a shift, but. Deep in the heart of the Trump administration, there's a lot of pro-Israel sentiment, even Israel rights sentiment, and that's not going anywhere. And that's also shown in the anti-Iran sentiment. It's the same people. So that's still there. It's not going away. And it relates to the disagreements between Rubio and Vance and, the other disagreements within the administration. And if I can just make one other point here, the old politics are not only bad. I could list 20 or 50 things that were good about them, like the sanctions on Syria that helped lead to the opening we're having right now. There are many good examples, and I think this idea that somehow because Trump is sort of singing the right notes from the podium, right, and on these agreed upon texts. You know, if somehow that's sort of a sign that the U.S. policy has shifted in a way that the Arabs are just going to love it and everything will be fine, I think is a bit of a pipe dream. You know, I think the proof is in the pudding, and if they implement these announcements in a way that's sustainable, that's beneficial to the wider populations, that take human rights concerns into account and all of the other things, fantastic. You know, but so far, and we're also looking back at Trump 1.0, you know, the record on implementation of these types of announced deals is checkered at best. And so, you know, hopefully, hopefully this will all go well. But so far, I mean, they haven't even staffed up the positions of the people that are going to implement these things in the various departments. Instead, they're firing tens of thousands of federal workers that would normally be the implementers. So you know, right now it doesn't look too good for the sustained implementation of all these things being announced.
Trita, how great is the risk if Israel continues its onslaught on Gaza and continues to push Palestinians, try to push Palestinians out of the enclave, that this could lead to destabilization across the region? I mean, there has been some pressure being put on Jordan as well as Egypt to accept Palestinian refugees. I mean, what would the consequences of that be?
I think that risk is significant. And in fact, in some ways surprising that almost now, 2 years of massacre on an unprecedented level in Gaza has not brought about more instability. I think if the step is taken to actually push out 2 million Palestinians into Egypt, into Jordan, then that certainly will change the picture dramatically, and you will see the destabilization of large parts of the Middle East as a whole. And I think that is an extremely dangerous outcome, and of course, one that is squarely not in the interest of the United States. I think there has been a tolerance for what Israel is doing based on the calculation that this will not lead to a broader instability and it will not lead to broader conflict in the region. I think those were very dangerous calculations. On several occasions, obviously, it was clear that it could have led to something much, much bigger. And I think the break that we are seeing between Netanyahu and Trump, I do believe that it's quite deep. I think we have seen clear evidence that in his America First constituency, not the people in Washington, but in his America First constituency, there has been quite an important turn away, at least not necessarily from Israel, but from the idea that Israel and America's interests are the same, and as a result, the United States should be listening to Israel. When you hear commentators from that circle, from Tucker Carlson and many others, listen to what they're saying, there is a very clear understanding that U.S. and Israeli interests are diverging. And as a result, when it comes to America first, it means that it's America's interests that need to be put in the center, not that of Israel.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.